Because Wilderness Trail is making an investment in whiskey.
No.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Gold Eagle Jake.
And tonight we are talking about whiskey as an investment.
Is whiskey a good investment? That is the topic.
That's the question.
AKA whiskey stonks or no whiskey stonks.
And let's be clear here. We're not talking about buying and flipping into the secondary market. We're talking about long-term buying and holding whiskey as purely as an investment.
Yeah, we're not talking about being an asshole.
No. And this one might get interesting because this is something that I've wanted to talk about for quite some time. And I think it is something that is kind of not talked about enough, but everyone kind of thinks about it. And there's probably some little debates here and there with people about the topic. But there's for sure a lot of different point of views and perspectives and predictions, really, because that's all it really is. And we're not giving financial advice here. Have to throw that out there.
Oh, we aren't?
For the sake of YouTube, we are not giving financial advice. Please talk to a financial advisor if you want to invest in anything.
And just do it at your own discretion.
Yeah.
We're just drinking whiskey and talking.
We are not fiduciaries.
Yeah.
No, we are not. In any way, shape, or form. So let's just dive into it. So whiskey investing has been something that really started cropping up, I think, during COVID, as like what I guess you would consider becoming a legitimate form of investment.
Yeah, I mean, we can even back up a little bit to like the people who knew what Pappy was when it was just sitting on the shelf, and the people that knew what Antique Collection was when it was just sitting on the shelf. Because clearly, there's people that knew what that was because they were buying and stashing, and we told the story about how someone came in and bought us out of everything we had on the shelf in like early 2000s. But yes, like COVID kind of sparked that because everyone was at home, everyone was drinking whiskeys, everyone had plenty of time to go on the internet. And that's when the secondary market just kind of boomed, and there was legitimate conversations about whiskey being a solid investment.
That's also when like I don't know how to put it other than like portfolios of whiskey investment started being created by like actual investment firms, and started cropping up more and more. Where like now I get hit by an advertisement for whiskey investment like every day in one form or another somewhere. So it's definitely something that's increasing in commonality, and seems to not be slowing down. But we want to get into the debate on whether or not it's a good idea. So Jake, we know that you're pro, so let's hear the pro argument.
I mean, I can talk for days about this on why it's such a good investment. I mean, we look at wine. Wine has been around forever, and more people around the world. I mean, bourbon specifically is booming right now in the U.S. and is just starting to catch on in other parts of the world. Wine has always been around everywhere, and if you look at the history of wine's a phenomenal investment. There's tons of $15, $20 bottles of wine 20, 30 years ago that are selling for thousands and thousands of dollars online in auctions. And wine is, in my opinion, a much riskier investment because you have the potential of opening the bottle and it being completely terrible. It can taste like vinegar once you open it up. And whiskey, on the other hand, has much less variables for that whiskey to go bad by the time you're ready to drink it. So that's that's just kind of like the main point of view. But like I said, like I can keep talking about this all day. Like
No, keep.
I
Yeah.
just think there's like value's never going to go down. The price is never going to go down. The price of whiskey is only going to go up. And I'm not saying any bottle is a good investment. I think smaller distilleries and like all these craft distilleries that are popping up are kind of like penny stocks when it comes to investing. There's probably a very small percentage that have the opportunity to become like the next Pappy Van Winkle, where you'll get 20, 30, 40, 50 times your initial purchase price of that bottle. But I think a lot of the big distilleries, because they're priced so reasonably right now, you fast forward 10, 20, 30 years from now, I mean, we look back. So Wild Turkey, for example, like people pay 10 times the price for Wild Turkey 101 that was distilled 20 years ago. And people always say they don't make them like they used to, just your standard
Mhm.
off the shelf bourbon. And I think 20 years from now, we're going to look back on what we had today and say, yeah, it's definitely not as good as what I remember. Or here's a bottle from 2023. Let's taste it next to this bottle from 2053. Now that we're making everything on computers, and compare the two and just see the difference in taste. I mean, I think we can all agree that 20 years ago, Wild Turkey 101 or any of the big brands tasted a lot better than it does today. And I don't know. What do you have to say about that,
Good
Dan?
points.
What do you
Good
have to
points.
like? Come on, something here.
So the counterpoint I have to all of that, and the reason why I'm not as big into it is, yeah, did things taste different 20 years ago? Yeah, but are there still really good damn whiskeys out there now that I want to drink nonstop all the time? Yeah. Is there going to be more because there's so many distilleries popping up and so many distilleries getting bigger and getting better and better stuff out? It's I can see a couple, like a bottle here or two, to hold on to for a long time and try it down the road and see how things change. But I just think that right now, with as much stuff as that's out there and as much good stuff and great stuff that you can find reasonably priced, does it really matter if it tastes different in 20 years when you're going to have some distillery that hasn't even started making their first barrel yet, putting out stuff that tastes really, really good and I enjoy drinking on a nightly basis from now? Yeah, I don't have any. I like the whiskey story. I like the sentimentality of whiskey, um, but I just don't see have the investment in consumables, personal investment in consumables, um, when there's so much stuff out there right now that tastes so
So
damn
yeah,
good.
so I think that's a good point on how other distilleries are going to be popping up, and we're going to be tasting some of their stuff. But I would say to that I don't think any whiskey that you purchase you're going to get less for in the future if you were to save it sealed. The value is not going to go down. You
Okay,
know, like the
that
value at
that's the
worst
one
case
thing I don't.
scenario will stay
Yeah,
the same. Inflation will kick in, prices will go up on other things. Maybe that distillery goes out of business, and then you find someone who craves that and will pay whatever for it. Or maybe that distillery rises to the top, and then you have a bottle from their first early years that the value of that's going to go way up. I think there's just way too much upside compared to the downside, and the downside is that the bottle maintains its value and doesn't increase.
So I'm kind of on the fence. I see the merits on both sides of this argument, and like I get Dan's point that um there's just so much availability. The market is so massive that competition is so high that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going to take off. I mean, I guess that's like kind of the case with any kind of investment. But on the pro side, um, I think the bigger opportunity isn't in American whiskey; it's actually in Scotch. And the only reason I say that is because Scotch is so like has such like demonstrable appreciation
So
based on age that it's like easily predictable. Whereas like American whiskey is not, and usually can't age to the same extent that Scotch can and still produce like a quality
So
product.
I agree up until this point, but I think that's because American whiskey hasn't bourbon hasn't like boomed in other countries yet. Other countries know about bourbon and they're into bourbon, and there's a reason why like Blanton's has all these Japanese edition, all these
Mm-hmm.
different editions that only get exported. Wild Turkey has a 13-year 101 that only gets exported. So like they kind of know
Jack Bonded was
Jack Bonded was
overseas
over. Yeah,
before we got
exactly.
it.
Until they approved the
Mm-hmm.
700 milliliter thing, that was only overseas. So and all these American distilleries, the big ones especially, have something that's really taken off overseas that isn't available in the U.S. So like they're just starting to kind of get into it, and I think as soon as that booms like it has in the U.S. and other countries, bourbon has the potential to be the next Scotch. I'm not saying it's going to overtake
So,
it or replace it, but I think a lot
mhm.
of like Scotch drinkers, whiskey drinkers in general that are in other countries are going to start to get into bourbon a little bit, and that's only going to help the expansion and the boom of bourbon. And it kind of just goes back to, all right, well, I have this bottle of Maker's Mark from 2023. Maker's Mark is not going to go away in 20 or 30 years. So do you think someone would pay the retail price for a 2023 bottle of Maker's Mark 30 years from now? Maker's Mark's probably going to be at like what, 50, $60 a bottle. They're going to pay that for a
Mhm.
bottle 30 years ago. And I bet you they're going to pay more to be able to get something that they can't get at that time period and compare it.
Yeah, so I that was actually a point I was going to argue was the growing American whiskey market globally. Because I think it definitely is something that's growing rapidly, and it is the demand is definitely there. Um, my biggest hesitation in like going 100% in on yes, whiskey is a good investment is just the amount of production capacity that's going to explode in like the next 10 years. Um, I just think the market's going to get so flooded that a lot of whiskey is going to become almost
But
worthless
see, that's when
because there's just going to be so
that's
much.
yes, a lot of it like if we're talking about the small craft distilleries, a lot of that will probably be worthless 10 years from now. That's what kind of why I compared like the craft distilleries to like penny stocks, because a couple of them
Mhm.
are going to blow up and be really big, and then if you have a bottle of one of their first releases, people are going to pay whatever you want for it. So I'm not saying go out there and
Mhm.
buy all these small craft distilleries, but a more safe investment would be from a bigger distillery, just an average product off the shelf, something that they're going to keep producing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And now you have something to compare it to in the future. And
See, like, so I think actually the opposite would be true. Like you mentioned, the guys that like bought you out of Pappy
mhm,
on Christmas. So if I'm sitting on 30 bottles of Pappy, and let's say they release like, I don't know, 1,000 bottles of Pappy per year. That's
mhm.
not the case, but let's just make a nice even number. And to make it even easier on myself, let's say I have 100 bottles of Pappy, so I can do the
Okay, the
math.
guy that just got his MBA is dumbing things down to hundreds. Can we just throw that out there again? Talking shit about his MBA and dumbing things down to 100 bottles. Okay, continue, Jake. Let's just wanted to throw that
so
disclaimer out there.
so if Buffalo Trace follows through on their expansion, which they will, because they're already producing, and that goes up to 2,000 bottles of Pappy released per year, and my 100 is still only 100 bottles out of 2,000. That's
Ah,
naturally going to
no.
decrease the value
Mm-mm.
of my
No,
bottles.
I think that's where you're wrong. I think people are going to start to pay attention to the vintage and when it was distilled, when it was bottled. And just like wine, you have good vintages and you have bad vintages. And with wine, again, it's a little more variable because some things age nice, some things don't. But whiskey just stays the same in the bottle. So when you have a really good vintage, it's going to stay good forever. And Buffalo Trace was actually an example that I would think is not a good investment because they already have such a big secondary market. And when they do start producing more, I do think their prices are going to come down. But if you have a bottle of Pappy right now, it's probably a Stitzel Weller bottle, and they don't, you can't get that anymore. That vintage is never going to go down in value because now it's all being distilled at Buffalo Trace, and although it's the same recipe, they don't make them like they used to. It tastes much different than how they're coming out right now. And that the same goes with like all the other Buffalo Trace items: Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor, Stag Junior. Like the items that have a little bit of a secondary but aren't ridiculous, like Pappy. Like those are probably a bad investment because they are mass producing those now. So in 10 years, those are going to be
Mhm.
everywhere. And they might hold a little value from today because there wasn't much bottled in this year and probably the next couple of years to come. But they're not going to draw as much hype when they're sitting on the shelves in every liquor store in the country.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
like my bet would be again back to like the Maker's Mark, back to the Wild Turkey, back to Heaven Hill, which has 6-year bourbon sitting on the shelf at $20. We're probably not gonna
Mhm.
see that 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Right.
My kind of feeding off some of your topics there, Jake, on other reasons why I have this as something. These are more personal for why I don't think they're good investments, and it's one reason is because I have zero
Oh yeah,
willpower,
I
and if
mean,
I
come on.
have a bunch of these really good bottles of whiskey sitting in my shelf that I'm trying to save for 20 to 30 years, it's not going
Willpower
to last.
aside, come on.
If I'm buying really good whiskey, god damn it, I'm drinking that really good whiskey. I'm not saving that for anybody else. Like, I want the good whiskey because it's a good whiskey. Second thing, when I look at an investment, is how much stress does or un, how much does that discomfort me of doing something? And I can tell you, after moving just 70 bottles from my last house to this house, chances are if you're holding on to stuff for 20, 30 years, you're going to move at least once. And if you're sitting on a crap ton of stuff, it is a pain in the ass to move. You got to add that into the cost of the investment because now you're having to move this shit everywhere with you. Um, and again, I just don't have willpower because I'm going to move it. I'm like, well, shit, I just moved into this house. I have this bottle of whiskey that I think might be worth so much, but I know it's really damn good. I'm going to crack this for my move-in day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
So one of
Go
the
ahead.
things one of the things I've kind of been doing to hedge my bet on some of the stuff that I think is worthwhile is actually getting signed bottles. So like I got this one at Gold Eagle from Bardstown. That's it's the master distiller that signed all
Yeah.
these, correct?
Mhm.
And then I've got the bottle of 2XO signed by Dixon Deadman, which is pretty freaking
Okay,
cool.
and even if that
You
even
know,
if that bottle wasn't signed, that's a damn good investment. How is that not? Dixon
right?
Deadman's
Because that's a limited release,
he's
one-time
already proved
blend.
himself. He
Like,
knows what he's doing when it comes to blending and creating whiskey. And
mm-hmm.
he said he's going to come out with 2 blends a year. Okay? 10 years from now, if you have 20 bottles, one of each blend that he created and you go to sell that as a set, you're going to make a hell of a lot more than what you paid for those bottles. And
Yeah.
worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, you might get what you paid. And even worse than that, you might be able to drink what you bought. So like,
Right.
there's no losing.
Yeah.
There's no losing, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's where I think the upside really exists, are in
That there's just no
extremely limited
downside.
releases, or yeah, no, I for sure. But I think if you're looking to like maximize your investment in whiskey, I think limited releases, but like like
Okay, and this also comes.
like stag or something like that is a limited release, but it's not going to be your moneymaker. Like your moneymaker is going to be something like that, like the 2XO. That's a every single time it's a special, unique release that you'll never be able to get again, or even like barrel.
And I was going to talk
Like
about single barrel picks too.
Right? Yeah. Another good option. Like you can already see single barrel picks going for much higher than what they retailed for if there's something particularly special about them.
Yeah, and you see like the same brand, same age, all the stats are the same, different single barrel picks going for a lot more than others. And remember, single barrels are first picked by the distiller because they're so good that they can't be blended. They need to stand out on their own. And then they're selected by a store or a group. So I mean, that's, in my opinion, a pretty safe investment, is different single barrel picks. And again, worst case scenario, you'll get what you paid for it, or you can just enjoy a really good whiskey and something that you probably would pay more for whenever you decide to enjoy it, because inflation. And this is coming from a liquor store owner. Literally every month we get a packet of stuff that's going up in price, like 10s, 20, 30 pages worth of lists of items that are going up in price every single month. And most of it is like $1 a bottle, 50 cents a bottle. But when it happens every month over the course of 30 years, it adds up to be a lot. And naturally, with inflation, everything's going to go up in price. Nothing's going to decrease. You're not going to find Maker's Mark cheaper on the shelf at any time in the future than you are right now.
Good points.
The one thing I would say that's anti against the single barrel, Jake, is normal single barrel pick. You're getting 180, 200 bottles for a single barrel pick. The market's going to be very limited for that because there's only a couple hundred bottles out there, and most people are buying them to drink them. So if you're saving them, you have a limited market of people that are looking for that. And on top of that, like, just I'll say, like always, I'll say a lot of really good things about Gold Eagle. Every time like you guys have a barrel pick, it's like, holy shit, this is a great barrel pick. And then like the next barrel pick comes out, like, holy shit, this is a great barrel pick. And it's like, okay, when I spend 3 times more for this barrel pick of Old Forester that I missed 20 some barrel picks ago, or should I get the new Knob Creek barrel pick for retail price right now? I'm going to go with the new Knob Creek, but that's me.
Well, Dan, this is probably the one time that I agreed with you and I smiled at you.
I mean, that's the one downside with barrel picks is it's such a small market. And so let's say to make things easy, let's say there's 173 bottles that come out in barrel pick. And you get one, let's say you have it, you drink it, you really want another one. Well, hopefully the 172 other people didn't open theirs and drink it, and hopefully someone saved it for you to get one and pay extra for, or just wait for another really damn good barrel pick to come out.
Just to piggyback on that, yes, there's going to be more and more barrel picks. Like we'll never stop doing barrel picks, and if you know us, you know we're very picky. So if we put something out, it's something that we truly believe in and really, really, really love in order to pick it and put our name on it. Um, but I'm kind of more talking about, so like let's use Old Forester as an example. The picks already kind of have like a hype and a following, and we're going to continue to do Old Forester picks as we go forward. But what if 10 years from now you had a collection of one of every Gold Eagle Old Forester picks? And let's say Gold Eagle kind of built up a name and reputation to be trustworthy and known as like a good picker when it comes to single barrels. Um, you don't think people are going to pay an arm and a leg for a 10-year vertical of all the different Gold Eagle single barrel Old Forester barrel proof picks?
Well, I was going to say Dan's going to eat his words when I go and sell the entire collection of the Jepson's
That's another
Avengers
example
single barrel
of
picks.
great investment. I mean, you're literally buying the same whiskey that's on the shelf for triple the price now with other brands. And as soon as people recognize Jepson's as, oh wow, they have MGP that's 7 and 8 years and it's $45. Boom, there goes Jepson's.
Mhm.
Yeah, my thought on what you're talking about is there's going to be people that do that, but it's going to be not saying that the Gold Eagle market's small by any means. It's not what I'm saying here. It's just if you have people that are collecting every single one of the 200 bottles that come out from a barrel pick release, there's very few people that are probably
No, there are
doing
very
that.
few.
Maybe I'm wrong. And it's just but it's such a limited market to try and to sell into, which makes it difficult to move.
And
then, if
I
you're
guess
using that as
another reason why I'm using that as an example.
Well, that's what
Yeah,
creates
so
the scarcity.
a lot of people will open it, and props to those people. You back to what you said, like if you have something, you're gonna drink it, you're gonna enjoy it. Like drink it and enjoy it. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Old Forester isn't the best example because like when I think of investment whiskey, I'm picks are amazing, but I'm also just talking about like your like standard Maker's Mark, your standard Jim Beam. Like there's just the everyday stuff that's sitting on the shelf right now. What's that going to be priced at 30 years from now? And are people going to be talking about how it tasted so much better 30 years ago, like how they are today? People swear by all these big brands how much better they were 30 years ago. And, Dusty's go for so much because they just don't make them how they used to make them. But anyway, back.
So in 30 years, we'll all be in our mid to late 60s. And so basically what you're saying is we're going to be crotchety old men saying, oh, God damn it, I missed the days when Buffalo Trace only had one 60-foot column still.
Yeah, man, that's what everyone talks about now with Wild Turkey. So I went to a private tasting with Dixon Deadman, and he was talking about he gets this question all the time, like why does Wild Turkey taste so much better in the 1980s and the 1990s? And his answer to that was, well, I've actually talked to Jimmy Russell about this, and he said because back in those days, you had to sprint up a ladder, flip a lever, sprint down, hit another lever. It was all hands on when you were distilling, and now most of these distilleries are just sitting behind a computer pressing buttons, and it's just not the same. You don't have the same feel, you don't have the same touch. A lot of this stuff is just changing, and we know with whiskey, the tiny
like
little
imperfections
variables
that give
make
it
a
a little
huge
bit of
difference.
character.
You can have the same exact whiskey, the same exact barrel sitting right next to each other, and they're going to taste different for whatever reason. But just the tiny little touches and variables affect the taste. And this is again supporting like the big brands with their everyday stuff just going up in value over time. And I think that's more relatable to like the wine industry because you look at the big wineries and a lot of their 1990s and early 2000s stuff sells for 10 times the price of what their stuff sells for now. And the stuff now is even marked up 2 or 3 times price of what it was back in the 90s, if you're still following with me. So like inflation will always go up for the everyday
Yeah.
stuff, but then to be able to get something that you can't get today that was made 10, 20, 30 years ago, I think is irreplaceable.
Yeah, me and my buddy, and this is when we were in college, but we were hanging out at his parents' house, and his dad had a bottle of Jim Beam from the 80s that was unopened. So we asked him if we could open it, and he
Right.
was like, I don't give a shit. So we opened it and drank some, and like it tasted like Knob Creek. Like it was like
I'm
really
sure it was
good.
much older than the age
It
statement
was just
anyway
normal
that was
Jim
on the
Beam.
bottle. And it's probably a lot
Yeah.
older than what it is today.
So like yeah, it's probably the same across the board. And that's why, like you said, the Dusties and the older bottles are going for so much, because I think there is a like perceivable difference.
It's supply and
in
demand. I think it
quality.
goes, and again, relating to like the single barrel thing. Half the people that buy the single barrel that are limit one, half of them are going to drink it right away. And a quarter of them are probably going to wait for a special occasion and then open it. And then you have a quarter of people who are just kind of sitting on it and letting it rest there. And the people that drank it and the hype that kind of goes with a lot of these single barrel picks and bourbon as a whole kind of sets in, and FOMO kind of sets in, and then people will seek it out and they have extra income. They don't care what they have to pay, you know. But I got a Daniel. Yeah, go ahead, Dan. I got another story, but
I was gonna say, what if we're thinking about this in the wrong way, and maybe this is the worst time to buy bourbon as an investment?
But
so let's say the 80s and 90s were great because everything was so hands-on. Now we're in the age of computers where everything's computerized. What happens in 10 years when ChatGPT makes all the whiskey and they have all that variance in it? And maybe that's
Everyone's
better
going to
whiskey than
look
it was
back
20
and
years
wish
ago.
that it was a distiller
there's-
behind a
there's
computer
still-
and not ChatGPT.
Well, what if it's better and they're like, God, I wish ChatGPT
so
would have made this 20
there's
years
still
ago.
something to be said about tasting like a vintage vertical of spirits, and I think. Again, I think more people who are nerdy about this, like we are going to get into the vintage and what year it was distilled and what year it was bottled. And, if you're a huge fan of Peerless, for example, wouldn't you want to try one of their first batches, one of their, 5-year batches, one of their 10-year batches, and one of their 20-year batches all in a flight? Like that's cooler
Right,
to
and
me than
I
trying
think that's
4
the
different
value of
ryes in a flight.
Yeah, I think that's the value of distilleries like Whiskey Acres and Bacta and others that are actually putting the year of distillation or bottling on the bottles so that you can actually build those verticals and know exactly when they're from and be able to compare.
So Castle and Key was
easily.
another example because they're doing everything in batches.
Yes,
and 2021 batch 1, 2021 batch 2, 2022 1, 2, 3, whatever. If you're someone that is holding on to every single batch, one sealed bottle of every single batch that Castle and Key has put out, I think right now you can go sell that vertical for a ton more than what you paid. And if we fast forward 10 years and you have some of the first batches that Castle and Key put out, even though now we all agree that it's not as good as what it's going to be 5 years from now, once they tweak a few things and their stuff gets a little bit older, the demand is still going to be there for some of their first editions that they put out.
Mm-hmm.
So I got another story. So about a week ago, I had a customer come in the store and tell me how he was going through his bourbon collection, and this is a guy that like just had a couple kids, so he's like, I haven't really been drinking too much, just been focusing on the family and the kids. And I realized out of nowhere that I just filled up this closet full of bourbon, and I don't know when or how I'm gonna drink it all. So Yeah,
I don't know
right.
anything about that.
I'm sure a lot of the listeners, and I know a lot of our customers probably have this issue. But he was like, I just kind of did the math and I looked at all the bourbon that I had, and it would take me more than a lifetime to drink it all. So I took about 45 bottles, brought it to an auction house, dropped them off, and collected a $10,000 check, which is an average of like 210-ish dollars per bottle that he threw in there. I mean, there's no way
Mhm.
he paid 200 for each of those bottles. I bet you a good half of them were under 50
Right.
bucks. And I don't know what he had. And he said it was nothing crazy. It wasn't like, a whole collection worth of Pappy and whatnot. But it was just 45 bottles that he
Mhm.
had and dropped off. And I don't know. No, no, no,
Charging
no,
that
no. Actually,
secondary
I bring
market.
that up because
Gotta.
I bring that up because I want your guys' opinion on that. I mean, obviously, like when this customer comes in the future and asks for things, like I'm gonna be very hesitant to sell them anything. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, right? Like, I'm clearly in that situation where I'm never gonna be able to drink through this. But that's like, to me, um, the vast majority, I would say, like probably like 80% of what I have is nothing particularly special. Like, it's all like standard release stuff.
That's not true.
Or like
That's not true.
mildly well, it's like
Most
mildly
of
special
your
releases. It's not like anything that
I'm
like
looking
I
at like a
think
third
people
of your
would be like
collection right now,
clamoring
and it's
for.
all like picks or one-off releases. And so I think what you're trying to say here is you don't have like Pappy, you don't have Antique Collection, you don't have a ton of Parker's
No.
Heritage,
Yeah.
and props to you because I know like you open a lot of your special bottles and enjoy them. Um, but
Yeah.
most of your
Like I'm
most
looking like I try and get people to try stuff that I know that they'll
yeah,
probably
I mean,
never be
and
able to
most of your
try.
collection is
You
like
know,
is really good shit, and I admire it, and I wish it was my own collection. Even though I have had access to this stuff, but it's mostly like one-off single barrels or vintage releases. I'm looking at a
mhm.
bunch of Castle and Key and a bunch of Old Elk up there, and all that stuff is going to change. You're not going
Yeah.
to find the same whiskey in that bottle even 3 years from now.
Right. And that's my mindset has shifted a lot since I first started collecting too. Is like if you would have asked me a couple of years ago if I wanted uh a Weller special reserve, I would have been like absolutely, like every single time. Um but now I would much rather take a single barrel that I like had know nothing about over almost
Yeah,
any Weller. Um or even like an Eagle Rare
I
or a
mean,
Blanton's. Like I kind of couldn't care less about a lot of the Buffalo Trace
I
stuff
think
anymore. I'm much more
the
interested in
Buffalo
those
Trace
single
stuff
barrels that are
is kind of dead.
different
I
or
think the
unique.
stuff
You
that
know?
already has a secondary market is not really worth going after and trying to buy as an investment.
Yeah.
No.
Again, like
No.
if you really want to know the things that I am actually stashing in my bunker, it's like normal Maker's Mark, normal Wild Turkey, normal Heaven Hill stuff like Fighting Cock is a $20 6 year Heaven Hill bourbon on the shelf, which brings up another point. The Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond, which used to be a 6 year, only available in
Mhm.
Kentucky for 20
Hmm.
bucks. They just raised it up to a 7 year, and now it's $60. And I think it has like even a secondary above that. Like that's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it is, it's not much. I don't think it's much higher on the secondary
But yeah,
market, but I
but
think it is
either way,
higher.
people still
This
chase it out. People still buy it as soon as it hits a store. Um, yeah.
this one?
And if
Yeah.
you're holding on
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this go for over
Yeah, see there.
$100.
If you're holding on to
Really?
the $20 bottle,
Yeah,
which you could still buy 2 years ago in Kentucky, those are going for over $100 for a 6 year Heaven Hill, all
yeah.
because they discontinued it, changed it to a 7 year. They raised the price up 3 times just so
Mhm.
that they could make the money and eliminate the secondary, but they actually kind of brought back the secondary and the hype, which is good for them because people are still going to pay
Yeah.
$60 for it. And it kind of built up their name
Yeah.
and reputation a
Mhm.
little bit more.
And I can like just kind of off on a tangent on that Heaven Hills thing. Like I can see people being upset when it used to be $20 for 1 year less. But when you look at the market today, if you said there's a good Heaven Hill 7 year bib out there for $60, people aren't going to bat an eye at that because there's so much other stuff that comes out that's younger that's got an $80 or $90 price tag on it, and I would take the Heaven Hill just
Mm-hmm.
as much as some of the other ones I'm thinking of.
Yeah. It's all about context, though. If you used to be able to get it for 20, you're going to be pissed if you have to pay
But
60
people
for it.
still are. People are still
Yeah.
buying it all up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like when something speaks for itself, it's I think it's justifiable. But yeah, I mean, the same thing's true about the McKenna 10, right? Like it was dirt cheap before it won, like a double gold or whatever at San
Fred
Francisco.
Minnick
He
called
did,
it.
yeah.
And
Fred
Fred
Minnick.
Minnick, pumped it up, and then it shot up to like $75, like overnight. So
And you can't get it. It probably
yeah,
goes
I
for
mean,
more on the secondary market, but you can't get it.
yeah, yeah,
So that's, I mean, see, but so that kind of goes back to like craftier, smaller distilleries are kind of like penny stocks. Like you're taking a gamble at something
right,
shooting up that high in value. I'm not saying buy any bottle and it's gonna 10 times in price. Like that's gonna take a little bit of research, a little bit of intel, and a little bit of just kind of like gut feeling to really nail that. But I'm talking more of just like, is it a safe investment? I think absolutely, because I think prices will not go down. Inflation will always creep up on you. It'll always increase. And then again, when we go back to like the vintages and different years, and there's only so much brands that are going to come out before they start imploding and going away. So I think, I'd rather drink a Maker's Mark, you know, flight from different years produced and taste the differences there, than just have 5 random bourbons in a flight. I think because the consumer is getting more educated
Mhm.
and their palates are developing a little bit more, like people just want more. Like there's got to be more to it. And I think vintages kind of bring in that
yeah,
factor. And again, going back to Bacta, focusing on vintages, going back to Whiskey Acres, putting the year on the bottle on Castle and Key, releasing 1 or 2 batches a year, 2XO releasing 2 batches a year. I think people are going to get more excited over comparing verticals from the same brand to see how the whiskey changed over the years, to evaluate a brand versus what whiskey's better, X, Y, or Z.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
All
So
right, well, do we want to talk
overall,
about what we're drinking real quick since this is a whiskey
Sure.
podcast?
What are you going to say, Dan? Overall, what?
what are you drinking, Jake?
Uh,
Nothing. I was gonna say that we're inconclusive on if whiskey is a good investment or not, and then I was gonna do a fancy little thing of be like an actual content creator, be like in the comment section below. Let us know if you think Gold Eagle Jake is wrong, and let us know if you think Dan is right.
I'm this is so
There
this
you
is
go.
this is
Yeah.
This is probably
Nice
one
phrasing.
episode where I'm very interested to see what people hear. It's a topic that I kind of want to debate and discuss more and more. And I can't wait to prove you wrong, Dan.
Mhm.
But yeah, what are we drinking?
Well, so before we move on, I will say that if you have the money laying around, if you've got 10 or 15 grand just sitting and you want to invest in something, just buy a barrel. Go to a distillery, taste samples, and buy a barrel. Because then you can always auction that entire barrel off at some point in the future if you don't, want to hold on to it after it's bottled, or even if it's still in the barrel. But
If
that's kind of an interesting alternative to
Yeah, it is,
buying
and that's
bottles.
something we maybe should have talked about a little bit more on this episode. But I've listened to a few podcasts with distillers and distilleries where they've talked about how buying a barrel is a no-brainer because literally it can't go down in value. Someone will pay what you paid for it
Mm-hmm.
if you're holding on to it for a couple years. It doesn't matter how it tastes. Someone will pay what you originally paid for it. And that's kind of how I got the idea of someone will pay for that Maker's Mark bottle that's just a standard Maker's Mark off the shelf. You'll get your money back 10 years from now, minimum, if not, twice as much. But yes, barrels of whiskey typically will never decrease in value. Because there's so many distilleries starting up, and as distilleries develop and there's more distilleries starting up, aged whiskey becomes less and less and less, and people are seeking out that age statement. And also for blending, even if your whiskey isn't the best, when it hits 12, 14 years, some of that whiskey turns a little bit for the worse. It can do great in a blend. Add a little bit of low oak
Right.
and layers that you're kind of lacking with your original product.
Yep.
My counterpoint to that would be if you have $10,000 to $15,000 laying around, put it in a 6-month CD at 5%, and you're only going to gain $500.
Oh,
Damn.
shut up, Dan.
But so like the wine industry has proven to outpace the all the big investments, like every the S&P 500. The wine industry has outpaced for the last 80 years, which is known as like the safest spot to put your money in.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Dan. Talking
Yeah,
about
Dan.
putting your money in bonds and mutual funds. Jesus Christ.
you don't
But Jake, did you also start the episode off saying that it could
wine,
turn to
yes. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying to invest in wine, but I'm just saying wine has proven to be a phenomenal investment, even though like 10% of wine is going to go bad and turn into vinegar. That's not going to happen with whiskey. Unless you're storing the bottles upside down and the cork disintegrates, that's not going to happen with whiskey.
Well, we did that episode about the shipwreck,
Yeah.
where there's a bunch of barrels of whiskey at the bottom of one of the Great Lakes, and those are all drinkable whiskey.
You know what? You're right. That is a great investment. So if you have the money laying around, buy a
Go
ship,
get a
fill it with
shipwreck.
whiskey, sink it, and then just let it sit for about 300 years, and then you have a really good investment, minus the cost of the boat. So perfect. You know what, guys? Jake's right. Perfect investment. Let's do it. Let's buy a ship, guys. Guys, let's buy a ship.
All right, if you buy the ship, I'll buy the whiskey.
Yeah.
So what are we drinking? Someone get this back on the rails, please, for heaven's sake.
We're on the rail, man.
All right, I'll go first. Since we're talking about investment grade whiskey, I'm drinking Scotch. I'm drinking the Glenrothes 18, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's sherry finished. Like I said, it's 18 years old. It's got great single malt and sherry flavor. It's really well balanced.
Is it peaty?
I don't know if. No, it is not.
It's Speyside.
It's Speyside. It's excellent. I'd highly recommend it if you can find it. I don't know if you can find it anymore.
The best part about that investment, Jake, was it was at the same tasting table as McKellen 18. It
Yeah,
was
of
way
course it
better and half the
was.
price.
Yeah, the McKellen 18
Another
was
another
absolute
great
garbage.
investment, Macallan. That's like the pinnacle of investments with whiskey, though, because yes, that's never gonna go down. That's like yeah, you're not gonna lose any money buying any Macallan. That goes
There'll always be some dumbass
that
willing to
goes
buy
up
a bottle of
20% every
Macallan.
year, no matter what.
I am drinking. I don't save bottles. If I have a bottle, I'm opening it and drinking it because I'm a lush. I keep my collection to a point where if I had to drink it before I died, I could finish it off. So that's where my collection's at. So we don't do any invest in savings here. I am drinking a Stag Junior, so junior, so
Hater.
2 or 3 years old. This is a 65.55% alcohol Stag. It's good. It's good. Could I take one of my Stag bottles because I have another bottle I haven't opened and sell it and make a lot of money on it? I could, but you know what? I'm going to drink it because it's good whiskey, and that makes me happier than selling it for a little bit
Good
of
for
profit.
you. Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
And to go back to what we said earlier, that wasn't the whole point of this podcast. It's not about buying and
no.
flipping. It's not about the secondary. We're trying to talk about like long term stuff to buy and hold. And if you want to see my collection, my bottles that I'm saving, it's like 90% stuff that we have sitting on the shelf right now. Just stuff that I kind of think is gonna increase and stuff that's safe. I don't really have a whole lot of like the other 10% would probably be like the penny stocks that we talked about, just the smaller brands that I think have the potential to kind of explode and stuff that people are going to be looking for in the future. But I am drinking a Wilderness Trail store pick. 5-year-old, $55 on the shelf for a barrel proof wheated bourbon single barrel. Phenomenal. If you ask me, I can drink these picks all day long from Wilderness Trail. They're one of 4 distillers that do sweet mash. And I think a lot of their 5-year stuff outshines their 8-year, 9-year stuff that I have had from them. So I think another good example why age doesn't necessarily mean better. But it's also kind of a younger distillery that just got bought, and I think some of their early stuff will go on to be sought after 10, 15 years down the road. Because who knows, as soon as a big conglomerate like Campari steps in, that could completely change what Wilderness Trail is doing as far as single barrels and aging. So this kind of stuff might be has the potential to be completely eliminated from their portfolio as time goes on.
Don't worry, guys. I'll sign some Whiskey Acres bottles for you for your collection.
I'll take it and
go up in value.
Yeah, I also got to point out that this is you're probably the only distiller that doesn't agree that whiskey is 100% a good investment.
You know what? Mold break.
Well, what were we at the Limestone Branch event last week? What was the presenter's
Fonte.
name? Sorry,
Stephen Fonte.
Yeah, Fonte. Stephen Fonte was saying that signed whiskey bottles are actually by law depreciated in value.
This is actually good, yeah.
Because Mitch McConnell wanted free bottles of whiskey. So he had people sign them for him, so they'd be worth $0.
Yeah, because when you sign a bottle, then you're technically what I forgot the wordage that he used, but
Congress people aren't allowed to accept gifts over a certain amount of money, and it's like a very small amount of money. So what McConnell did was he changed the rules in the House so that or in Congress that if someone signs a bottle of whiskey and gives it to you, it no longer holds its value.
Because it was
so people can just give him bottles of signed whiskey.
Yeah, it was,
so
and I think it was
$0 rather
whoever
than
signed it. It was kind of like a joke. Like he was like, "All right, you signed my bottle, now it's worth a penny, or now it's worth nothing. Like, nobody's going to want it if you sign this bottle. So technically I can accept this as a gift because you signed it, because it's worth nothing.
Yeah. Right.
And please sign it on the glass so I can just take my thumb and wipe off that Sharpie mark as soon as you leave. But
all right, any final thoughts?
Buy as much whiskey as you have.
yeah, bad investment. Don't do it.
Spend all your money on whiskey. As much as... Yes.
At Gold Eagle. Only at Gold Eagle. You only find the collectible
If you have
bottles.
storage... No,
at
but
Gold
seriously,
Eagle.
like, I legitimately believe whiskey is a great investment, and I think you can just... The stuff that's sitting on the shelf, the everyday items from the big distilleries, safe investment. They're not going to go down in value. You'll get your money back, or worst case scenario, you'll drink it, and save yourself some money, because in the future that same brand is going to go up in price. Inflation just happens. There's nothing we can do about it. But yeah, and also smaller brands are kind of like penny stocks, and I don't have too much advice for that, except for pay attention to the distilleries that use the vintage and mark what year and what batch it is, because I think a lot of those have the potential to be collectible in the years to come. Yeah.
Good summary.
Nice. I say
Dan,
invest
closing
whiskey
arguments?
into your. I say invest whiskey into your stomach because that's where it fits the best. Boom, mic drop.
It got silent because nobody agreed with you. I was like, what'd you just say?
So yeah, I'm still fairly undecided on this. I do have a couple bottles saved and stashed away that I'm probably just gonna hold on to and see what happens. But yeah, for the most part, I'm on Dan's ship. I just want to drink it. But
what we should have done was done the Always Sunny in Philadelphia board of what side of the fence you're on, and done the arguments.
We'll see what the comments have to say about this one.
Yeah, so
I think we know that they're all in my favor. So
comment on which person you agree with, Dan or Gold Eagle Jake, and we'll see who comes out on top.
Way to take a stand, other Jake, and just sit on
We
the
said
fence.
he's mostly on your side, which I have no clue
Gave
why.
my opinion.
That's true. Mostly, I want full.
I want full
I don't
on
want
my
one
side.
foot off the fence. I
mean, actually, I don't care.
I
I don't care. I'll buy all the whiskey and save it.
Well, if someone was if I had a certain amount of money and somebody said you have to invest this in something other than stocks, I'd probably do whiskey.
I would probably go land.
That's a farmer right there.
Yeah,
Land's obviously a great investment, but yeah.
All right, guys.
Yeah, whiskey's better.
Yeah.
No.
Again, we are not
advice.
financial advisors. Do not take anything that we say with any
If
kind
you
of-
listen to this episode and at the end still think we are financial advisors, then you have a lot of things.
Yeah, that's
wrong
all
with
on you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's not on us at that point.
All right, let's plug our stuff.
Yeah, Jake, where can people invest in whiskey at?
goldeaglewine.com. Your best investment opportunity awaits. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Follow us on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. And yeah, like I said, come talk to me. If seriously, if you agree with me and you think whiskey is going to be a legitimate investment, actually meet with a couple people that agree with that, and I kind of advise them here and there. So if you are one of those people who are curious and interested to talk and discuss more, my office doors are open. Swing by and let's chat it up. But yeah, goldeaglewine.com. Follow us on the socials to see what's coming in, and that's where you can keep up with what we're doing.
But you have to leave a comment
leave
before Jake
please.
talks to you.
Mm-hmm. Show these guys.
So if you want to listen to us, you can watch us on Spotify and YouTube, or listen to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us at Bourbon Matters on Instagram and Facebook, and go to our website, bourbonmatterspodcast.com. Email us, bourbonmatters@gmail.com. Yeah, that's it, right? I covered everything.
I think so. Good enough. All right, guys. This was fun. We should argue with each other more often.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.